I started here. It's just revisiting what we did from last lesson, which was using skills from GCSE and our renewed focus on completing the square to sketch graphs. One piece of advice, make sure that when you sketch, that they do continue to go away, okay? Sometimes people do draw graphs like this, where we have sort of like vertical lines. This is not correct, and it would be marked down, okay? I've also asked here at the start, how many solutions do these have? So how many solutions do we have with these here? Well, you might notice that x minus 6, x minus 6 again equals 0 is the factorization for this one. So you get a repeated root, this is sometimes called, or we can say that this is one distinct, one sort of solution of a number in its own right. Sometimes we actually cannot get answers. If you use the quadratic solver, it will come up with numbers and then i's at the end, which is the imaginary aspect. So this one we say has no real solutions. What that actually means is if you draw it, it never crosses the x-axis. You need to cross the x-axis because that's where your root is. So this has no roots, whereas this one here would have a root at 6, but it would just touch and then go away. A question like this is a situation where you sort of go past it to one side and back the other side. So this is when we have two distinct solutions, or we call this two roots. Now, why are we talking about this? Well, it's linked very closely to the discriminant. We talked a little bit earlier about how the quadratic formula can be used to find solutions. And normally, because of the plus and minus aspect, it gives you two solutions. You will get whatever minus b plus the square root is, and then you will get minus b subtract the square root. But if the part under the square root is positive or 0 or negative, this could determine the relationship that these two things have together. Now, what would happen if we had a negative number under the square root? Well, we've been told that we can't do this. So this is actually when we would have no real roots. It's when it's not possible for us to do anything else. And this will happen sometimes. We said the bit under the square root, but the bit under the square root is actually called b squared minus 4ac. So if this is negative, you won't have any roots. Well, when will you get equal roots? When will the numbers be the same? Think about this again here. Well, if we had the square root of 0, that would be 0, wouldn't it? So we'd be adding and taking away the same number. In other words, when b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, you get the same answer for the plus and the minus. You get one distinct solution, or equal roots, it's sometimes called. And finally, most of the time, probably for most questions that you've seen, you get two distinct roots, which is where you add on a number. So say maybe you add on the square root of 9, which is 3. Maybe you add on 3 in the numerator here. And in the other one, you take away 3. Well, clearly you're going to get different answers. So when you have a positive number here, this will mean you get two different answers. You must understand and use these connections. They will come up extensively throughout A-level. This is the discriminant, which is part of the quadratic formula. We don't need the whole thing, but we need to understand that there are certain conditions on the discriminant that affect how many roots there are, how many solutions there are. As a diagram, positive So this really means positive. Positive discriminant means 2 roots. Negative discriminant means no roots at all. It does not intersect here. Equal roots means we have the equals sign. And it is just touching. We could draw it as well like this, but this is coming from the other direction. This must be some kind of negative x squared. So let's use this information now. And we can find b squared minus 4ac by quickly finding the letters a, b, and c. And I will normally write these out at the start of the question. So a here is 1. B here, include the sign, always include the sign, is a positive 3. And c is 4. b squared is 3 squared minus 4. A is 1. And c is 4a and 4 is and c is 4. So 9 take away 16 is minus 7. What does it mean? It means you will have the square root of minus 7. That means that there will be no roots. It's not possible. Pause the video and have a go at the next 2, and I'll reveal those to talk about those. So I'm assuming you've done that now. A is 1, B is minus 4, C is 1, should give you 12. This means we are doing the square root of 12. So we have 2 answers. The discriminant for the next part is 0, so there is one distinct answer, one distinct root. Now, as the numbers get larger or they are moved around and things, whatever is in front of your x squared is your a. Whatever is in front of your x is your b. And the part without is your c. What's your a for this one? Minus 3. The b is 1. The c is minus 4. And sometimes one of them may be a 0. So on this one here, a is minus 1, b is 0, c is 1. Watch out for double negatives. So a word example with a problem. This one has some unknown letters in it. P is a constant, so it means it's like a mystery number. So here is our equation. Look at the part with the x squared, then the part with the x, and then the part with no x squared, no x. It has equal roots. As soon as you read this, a signal needs to go off in your mind, which is b squared minus 4ac equals 0. So we need to identify what a is and b is and c. Well, a is 1 because 1x squared is written as x squared. B is 2, but it is also p because 2 and p are in front, and p is the mystery number. And c is actually an expression. It is very common to be given a question like this where maybe 1 or 2 of them are numbers and one of them is a bit more difficult. You need to group things together. Group things together that have an x squared, group things together that have an x, and group things together that have no x or x squared. If you do this, you should be able to write some kind of formula and sort of solve something. So b squared minus 4ac equals 0. B is 2p, so 2p squared, and you'll get marks, by the way, for having this understanding here of the correct sign and substituting in, you would get credit for this. Minus 4, a is 1, and c is 3p plus 4, and is equal to 0. So we need to clean this one up. So this will be 4p squared. It's not 2p squared. It's 4p squared. I'll put the 4 and the 1 together, so minus 4, and then actually I'll just put this part again to begin with. So 4p squared minus, well, that's going to be minus 12p, and minus 16 equals 0. If you remember from before, one of the tricks is that if they all have the same factor and they're equal to 0, you can divide through that. Or another way you might want to represent that is you can factorize it out. And then you could divide by 4 on both sides. P squared minus 3p minus 4. Can we just quickly factorize it, I wonder? So minus 4 plus 1. Find the value. There must only be one. It's a positive constant. In that case, p is 4 then. Okay? For this, solve the equation. Well, now we know what the equation actually is. It's x squared plus 8p, because 2p means 2 times 4, which is 8. 3p plus 4, so this is 12, this is plus 16, equals 0. Okay, and this is going to be x plus 4 squared equals 0. X is minus 4. Why is there one answer? Why is there not two answers? It has equal roots. Remember, equal roots is when you have one distinct solution. So this answer makes sense. Pause the video and have a go here. Remember, a is in front of x squared, b is in front of x, c is the part without. Careful with the signs as well, if they are there. So I'm assuming you've had a go. Careful with the 5k being squared as 25k squared. K is an integer, so 5k plus 2 will not give us an answer. Two distinct solutions. So distinct solutions are when it is positive. B squared minus 4ac is greater than 0. It must be this sign here. Okay? If you do this, it is not correct. If you do this, it is not correct. Accuracy, very important to show that you have an understanding of this. The range as well, the range often means an inequality sign. So that's a bit of a clue. So you should now be able to have a go at questions for 2G, and the discriminant will come up quite a lot in chapter 3 and beyond as well. Finally, we will talk a little bit about modeling questions at the end. So at the end of the chapter, you're going to practice these mainly in context from mechanics. So the idea is we're going to use all the kind of skills that we've done from before, just with the context, a lot more worded information now. A spear is thrown over level ground from the top of a tower. So imagine here is sort of a tower up here, level ground, and we throw a spear. The height is given by this equation. So what does this mean? It means instead of y equals x or f of x, you put time into this equation here, and it will tell you h, which is height. And there's a restriction. T must be at least 0. T is the seconds, so it's time. So you can't have negative time, not in this course anyway. So what do these things mean? Well, what does 12.25 mean? 12.25 is the only part without a t, so it's independent of t. That means if you do h of 0, you'll get 12.25. In other words, it must be the height that you start throwing the sphere. Sorry, what are we throwing? The spear, even. It must be the height that we're throwing the spear from, or the height of the tower. How many seconds until this thing hits the ground? Well, what is true when you are at the ground? What is true in that situation? Well, the height is 0. That doesn't mean h of 0. It's not the same thing. That means t is 0. Here we're saying that h is 0. In other words, 0 equals 12.25 plus 14.7, etc., etc., etc. We have a quadratic that we need to solve. We get a negative time, which is no good. So we write it out and then we say that this is invalid. And we get a more sensible answer, such as 3.6. Part C is completing the square. So we can complete the square. Use your answer to part C. Remember, questions are linked together. They're meant to be some sort of coherent question. So you need to sort of look for links between them. Find the maximum height. Well, this is a negative quadratic. It's negative because it has minus in front of the t squared. So completing the square will tell you what this point is here. In other words, at 1.5 seconds, it is 23.275 meters above ground. Okay, time for you to have a go at some of the questions yourself now.